Okay, I think we might get started then. So thanks all for joining. I'm Poppy Taylor. I'm on the BCO London and South East NextGen Committee, and today I'm pleased to be joined by Victoria Bajela from Savills research team and Andrew Barnes, who heads Savills Central London Tenant Rep team, as well as Hunter Booth, head of West End agency at Savills. So the team are here kindly to present to us the Q1 market update. If anyone has any questions during the presentation, please do put them in the Q&A box, and we'll have the opportunity to cover some of the questions at the end of the presentation. I guess without further ado, guys, please do take the slides.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Victoria, and I look after our central and office research here. So next slide. We're kind of going to take you on a journey. I'll obviously set the scene by talking about the macro picture, then hand over to Hunter to talk about, what he's seeing on the ground in the leasing market, and then we'll talk about what it is that occupiers want with Andrew. So starting off, I don't think this slide will come as a surprise to anyone. We're looking at weaker economic growth, and general public is feeling quite pessimistic about the economic outlook for the next 12 months. Cost of living crisis, rising costs, all of those things weighing on people's minds. Next slide, please.
We always like to start with a positive, don't we?
Yeah.
Really get everybody in the mood. But what I would say about this, and Andrew can comment, is I'm on the leasing side, Andrew's on the tenant side, so we've got those kind of slightly differing viewpoints. But there is a sense, I think, with occupiers that the world has been, sort of inverted commas, slightly mad for so long now that there's a sense, business rumbles on. And so the new normal is this kind of state of flux, and, recent events this week in the press, there's to some extent, and Andrew can comment, people just kind of take it in their stride a little bit more and realize business has got to go on, right?
Yeah, I mean, post-COVID, we all sort of talked about, we had about 18 months, didn't we, of sort of, the new world order, which really looked a lot like the old world order, just people didn't come in 5 days a week. And then we've continually, since then, over the last 5-6 years, there's always been something, hasn't there, going on. There's always been a reason, whether it's political or otherwise, or global crisis, or war in some country or several countries. And as you say, Hunter, I think people have just said, well, life's got to go on, business has got to go on. So although there's all these headwinds, people are still making decisions. And who would have thought that rental growth, particularly in the West End and more latterly now in some of those towers in the city, would be so strong with so much pressure going on? So, it does, we'll talk a bit about this later on, but it does underpin London's position as such a major global city. You've kind of got to be here and got to get on with it.
Yeah. And I think with that, obviously cost control is a key priority for businesses. I don't know if you've noticed occupiers changing their approach. I'm sure we'll touch on that later, but that negativity feeds through to business confidence as well. And I think reducing costs is definitely something that's going to be the highest ticket off item this year. And you can see that in the Deloitte CFO survey this year, where the priority for the next 12 months is reducing costs.
I guess, yeah, I mean, also there, everyone reducing leverage, everyone was hoping that interest rates would come down faster than they have. So I think CFOs are sort of concerned about cost of borrowing. And clearly there are people sort of wanting to innovate and bring out new products. And we'll talk a little bit about AI later on and its influence, but that's obviously quite an exciting part of the world we all live in today. And what it means, well, we're all finding out.
Well, let's talk about it right now.
Yeah. So, aside of all the geopolitical uncertainty, the economic backdrop, the UK does have a productivity issue. It's been an ongoing one for quite some time. And I think we're all looking for AI to boost productivity over the next few years and the future going forward. Again, if you click for me, survey results from CFO survey, again, optimism about how business performance will do with integrating AI. I do think there's some structural challenges with AI, with upskilling. You might have the technology, but it takes time for people to learn and upskill and have the skills to apply it in a way that unlocks that productivity for businesses. But I don't know if you guys.
But I also think we're in a world, where certain management consultants are out there saying they are prohibited, they've banned their staff from using AI. And I know law firms are obviously using it to do some of the more menial tasks, but right now, certainly from the experience of where I sit, both us and clients, you can't rely on AI as a professional services firm. Certainly, it's not in a position where you can rely on it. I'm sure everybody plays around with ChatGPT and the other various, co-pilot systems that are out there. And what you get out of it, when you read it, isn't right. Now, it gives you some ideas, but it doesn't you can't rely on it. So as a result, it's going to take time for people to be able to rely on AI.
Yeah.
So bringing it back to a real estate kind of for our expertise, if you like, I mean, AI has gone completely ballistic in the last 6 months in terms of taking office space. We'll touch on that when we get to the slides about take up for last year. But, it obviously means something while business works out what role AI plays in each of those individual businesses. Here on the ground, I mean, there's new entrants almost on a daily basis taking serious amounts of office space.
Yeah, and what is great, and I'll come back to this at the end, but, London's strength as this global city. Outside San Francisco, it's London. For AI, Google, their DeepMinds was born here and continues to be here.
Yep.
Various other clients I've got, whose names I better not mention, but who have also made major statements in the press that London is their hub for AI. So the talent pool that we have here, yes, it might challenge in terms of how much space people need longer term, but we're not seeing that yet. But I think it will create more demand as a result of people growing here. And we're seeing companies grow from 5 to 20,000 to 120,000 square feet in 2 years.
Yeah.
Who want AI, who are AI
I suppose, recent events, again, going back to those sort of global events, the recent ones or the not quite so recent ones, only go to reaffirm London as that gateway city, right? It's sort of awful as it is to say, it reaffirms London as, a safe, transparent place to do business, and London will probably only benefit from that.
And off the back of that, AI and all the innovation, perfect. AI and innovation, we're expecting to see, and the good thing we've got is employment growth over the next 5 years is projected to grow at 2.4%. And I've seen this compared to some of the other gateway cities, and we're definitely leading the pack. New York was at 0.4%. So really encouraging to see London leading the pack in that. And it's definitely focused on the professional, the science, the tech, the innovation, and all of the creative new job roles and industries that will come out of that as a result. So, the outlook for London is quite positive in my view. And if you go on to the next slide.
I was just going to say, I think particularly also up from that on the ground view, really pleasing for us to see the return of tech in the last year, maybe at a stretch 18 months, because it was quiet post-COVID for the first 3 years then. And it's regained its confidence, and new tech firms are emerging. The larger ones continue to get larger, all encouraging signs.
Yeah. And then this is the question that we're kind of hoping everyone will start talking about now, working from home. I think, we were talking about this earlier. I think this is the year where we can finally put this to bed, because it hasn't really had an impact on the occupational market. We've all seen the headlines over the past few years. The office is dead, all of that. It hasn't really translated into the occupational market, which we'll show you in a moment. On screen, we've got our occupancy stats on the right, and we've got the TfL and the transport stats. And you've probably seen a 10% reduction in the overall usage of transport on those work days, and 10% reduction to occupancy rates over the average for the week. But when we're talking about our peak days, we're near enough reaching where we were pre-pandemic, especially in certain industries. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, and I think, there aren't, our industry aside probably, and private investment management banking, there aren't many industries that are actually really doing 5 days, but before were they anyway? A lot of professional services firms would argue that most of the staff were super productive Monday to Thursday, and the Friday was get stuff done. And then really, it was a sort of slow start into the weekend, and people would go and see clients, they'd have client lunches, spend their time productively. So I think my view is, we're into this world of probably most of our clients committing to 4 days. If they're financial services, they're in 5. In fact, they're probably in 6, actually, some of them. But in reality, you know, it's probably Monday to Thursday. You know, that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday thing, I think has gone. Certainly, if I look at my commuter train in from Surrey, you know, it's only really Friday that's the super quiet one.
Yeah.
And businesses are encouraging staff to come back in. And I think that also, I'll come on to it in a little bit more, but that has also been driving some of the office moves, because there's this, you know, a bit overused expression of earn the commute. But for people to get their staff into the office 4 days a week, they've got to make it good. They've got to make their offices good. They've got to put amenities in, and that's changed demand and it's changed buildings, which we'll come on to.
But I think this slide, just to conclude on a macro kind of picture that, you know, we're setting the scene with, you know, this isn't the first time that we've had that story about declining office and how things were going to change. And again, you know, we've been around this before. And I think AI is going to be the next working from home, the next thing that the market focuses on, whether that's going to have an impact on demand. And I'm not too worried about the impact in the shorter term. You know, there's new industries and innovation that's come out of all of these different economic shocks and technological changes, which has kept the office market going. So I think we're going to see more of the same, more innovation, more changes. And, you know, if you click again, you can see take-up dips initially as a reaction, and then it goes back to where it was before. Yes, we have a new normal, post-COVID normal, which is 10% down on the long-term average, but the leasing market doesn't really show any signs of shock beyond that. And I think that's a great point to hand over to Hunter for a bit of more your thoughts on the ground and what you're seeing.
I knew you'd finish on a positive. See, it took a while to get there, but we got there in the end. Yeah. So we'll move into the section now, which is from my kind of, I suppose, landlord leasing perspective, with everything that Victoria talked about at the macro level and how that has translated, particularly in 2025, but kind of general trends as well. Before handing across to Andrew, I thought this was quite a useful. Hopefully you all recognise this, but a useful sort of starting point, because what I imagine here is, you know, Andrew's with one of his occupier clients, right, and he lays a map of central London out and kind of goes, right, you know what, I'll tell you how it's looking on the map. And if you take out the kind of periphery submarkets, so in the West End, the kind of Hammersmiths and White Cities and Aldgates in the East, and you just look at the core and core plus markets, so you're kind of Paddington through Fitzrovia and Marylebone and the city core principally, and probably city fringe, then I imagine it from my perspective is the rents have homogenized to quite a high level, right? So as an occupier viewpoint, you're kind of going, lay this map out, take out Mayfair St James, take out the city towers as the extreme high rents, as they always will be. It's a bit of a sweeping statement, but broadly, the band has tightened significantly to what you will pay in any of those kind of core plus locations. So as a starting point for an occupier, someone like Andrew is going, don't worry about costs so much. Like, yeah, there's still a 20% spread. But what I'm saying is I think the battleground has shifted away from years gone by where finances and value were absolutely the number one point, and choosing a cheaper office over a more expensive one was the debate. I think that's moved away from that. That's not saying that people are willing to pay anything. There's still a negotiation, of course, to do. But I don't think it's the principal driving force of decision-making. I think that has switched much more to location, as it always was. You know, it's just a rejigging of the order of criteria about how people choose. The Elizabeth line's thrown that kind of curveball in as well, and everyone's sort of, although from the research point of view, there's kind of no data to suggest that it's affected things as much as everyone kind of thinks it is. But I just wanted to make the point that rents have squished down so much that it's maybe not the principal factor at the starting point of acquiring a new office. Give you a sense of how big the market is. So this is how it lines up, well, way back to 2000, but kind of looking at the last sort of solid line, if you like, before the predictions in the hatched area on the right. So 2025, it's really terribly dull because it's a wonderfully average year, as it sort of has been kind of since COVID, right? But I'm sort of sat here in my position at my desk going, well, I'll gladly take wonderfully average, because with everything that kind of going on in the world and the uncertainty and the lack of business confidence as Victoria started out with, maybe that's not such a bad thing to be hitting that kind of red dotted horizontal line showing the 10-year average. But that's kind of how we sit. Just drawing your attention to the right-hand side there, 77% of 25 take-up is for newly refurbished space, right? So everyone, I'm probably on the call, I won't make any assumptions, but I imagine the majority of people are familiar with the flight to quality theme post-COVID, where everyone re-emerged from their bedrooms and there was an arms race for the top floor with the private terraces below the communal terrace. And that was a real thing. So 77% is still high, but that's actually off what it was before. 21, 22, and 23, that percentage would have been higher. And that's telling us that people, probably linked to what Andrew was talking about, people returning to the office and that balance of power between the employer and the employee kind of recalibrating back to the employer a little bit more. They're less scared of staff leaving. That's telling us that people are kind of maybe just sort of notching down their what they're willing to accept as a quality of building. It doesn't have to be the best floor and the best building, the best location anymore, because frankly, there's none of that left, right? There's very few options. And people are kind of relaxing a little bit about wanting the best of the best. The environmental theme is interesting. It's not something we're going to talk about in any great depth today. Think about that kind of mix of decision-making criteria, the location, the rent level. Environmental credentials are in the mix, but I don't think they've particularly shifted up or down in importance. I think they're there. I mean, Andrew,
I think that's right. I think the investor market was ahead of the occupier market. The investor market was very conscious that occupiers might start selecting buildings based on their environmental criteria. We got occupiers caught up pretty quickly as to, right, what's the minimum I need? And then most of these, refurbishment on new buildings, they all really have the same medals, So as a result, those days of putting up 6 or 8 sort of different accreditations, you just expect to have them. So there isn't much differentiation really now between the haves and the have-nots. You really, as you say, Hunter, between is it new refurbished grade A or not? And that's kind of the two types of space there are really.
And the last theme at the bottom right there, which is interesting, and again, I assume probably the majority of people on the call will be familiar with this, but sub 5K, 65% of transactions were for fitted space. I'm actually sort of slightly surprised that it's not higher than that, because as far as I can see in our instruction book, pretty much everything below 5K is now fitted. I think the stat is more like 85% of the supply is actually fitted, but 65% of the transactions, that's quite an interesting one to work out. What's more interesting is the question, and I probably won't answer it, but it is how big do the fitted units go, right? Sub 5K, obviously fit them out now. 5 to 10, the stats are 50-50. I went to a launch yesterday of a building that will remain nameless, but it was above 10K, right? 13K floor fitted. So does it just keep getting bigger and bigger, or does it get to a point where you can't second guess what an occupier is going to want, and you're probably not doing the right thing, so you're going to have to amend it?
Yeah, I think one theme there that I think comes through, and you'll see it come out in some of the later slides, is the CFO driving a lot of decisions, and this reluctance to spend capital on real estate, in terms of fit out. And so a lot of people are trying to be more creative as to OPEX is one thing. And if my OPEX is higher than a plan, okay, I'll manage that. I'll just have to sort of make some more turnover and it'll match. But CapEx, people are trying to preserve capital. People are sort of nervous about spending capital on fit out. Big occupiers, fine. You've got to get on with it. But I think your 15, 20,000 square foot occupier, which makes up a lot of deals that we do in central London, I think they are far more sensitive to spending their money and they would like fitted out. The problem is, as a landlord, are you going to get it right? At 5,000 square feet, there's only so many permutations of an office layout. Start going to 20,000 square feet. Well, are they professional services? In which case they need more cellular.
Yeah.
So it's quite expensive to get it wrong. So I think that's probably the biggest barrier to actually seeing that sub 5 or 5 to 10 go to 10 to 20 on a more frequent basis. It's expensive to get it wrong.
I think the last point about the fitted is sub 5K, you were probably only aiming for a kind of 3-year term. So anyway, and you're still getting that 5 to 10, certainly 10 plus, the pressure will be on from those occupiers saying, I'm taking fitted space because I don't want to spend the capex, but I also need flexibility because I'm growing and I want to get out. Therefore, I will give you a 3-year term. And that is hard for landlords to swallow because Cat A might take you longer to lease it, but you've got a much better chance of getting a 5, if not a 10-year term. So you're not going to get that on a fitted unit. So,
and the last thing I wanted to add on the fitted space, we have that dip, but last year we saw a lot of lease renewals, particularly with the larger occupiers, going back to that cost thing we've touched on. And that's not represented in the stats here, but I think that's an interesting thing we're starting to see a lot more of, that leasing and the structures of those leases as well transforming.
I'll come on to well in a moment, absolutely.
Sort of the good news story, I suppose, of any kind of part of the market, however you slice it up, has been rental growth. You know, slightly flippant comment, but it's just not been a problem, right? Particularly at the prime end of things, however you want to define it, grade A, and look at the gap between the dotted lines and the solid lines, dotted lines being grade B, it grows wider year on year.
Yeah.
You could argue that, like I was saying earlier, employers or occupiers being sort of slightly less worried about staff leaving, do they start to return to more grade B kind of buildings in good locations? If locations is the number one factor for, you know, getting it right for staff commutes and stuff, it's a question, maybe Andrew can have a go at it or not, but will we start to see people go, well, I'd rather have a distinctly, you know, grade B building in an amazing location rather than the flip reverse of that amazing building, middle of nowhere?
That's right, Hunt. I mean, we you know, this sort of flight to quality has gone a long way, but there comes a point where, and you'll see it in a minute, actually on one of my slides, where location is an overriding factor. And you know, if you've got to compromise a little bit, but you're gonna have a fantastic commute and you're going to be super central for amenities for staff, probably most of your staff would go, actually, do you know what, I would rather be on Regent Street than I would rather be on the South Bank, if that's what it comes to. So. Yeah. I think that is an important factor. We'll show that in a minute in terms of preferences on the survey we did.
So our average West End, we're focusing on West End today, obviously, average West End rent is nearly 170. The way we do it is taking the top 10% of the rents in any given month, and that creates our prime average. So that number does fluctuate quarter to quarter depending on what has happened, but it's either way you cut it, it's a big number. Yeah. We've thrown the city in just for that relativity, and back to that initial point I made about the squeezing of rents. You know, when we talk about 170 nearly for the West End, that's very much clearly Mayfair and St James, but you know, you take those out and you talk about your Fitzrovians and Marylebones, it's pretty close to that number that the city average prime is at. So actually not so far apart. Headline demand is focused on the areas of lowest supply. So you know, that might sound logical. The near unintelligible graph that Victoria has created on the right hand side. I'm sure people will be squinting their eyes at the 35 shades of yellow.
Blue, focus on the blue.
No, we just love that. We love yellow here, don't we? Don't worry about the detail. The solid dark line there is basically showing, you know, Mayfair, St James, that those core markets have the lowest supply, and that tallies with where the highest demand is, right? So, surprise, the line that's alarmingly shooting up at the top of the graph there is more periphery markets. So that's how we see it, as the vacancy rates for those two kind of super prime markets. City Towers on the left, 2.6, West End Core 3.6. West End Core, different houses record it differently. I think we're probably at the higher end of how people are recording it. So if we were to strip out tenant space that's got less than 5 years on the lease, or subpar grade B kind of space, I think that would be halved instantly. Yeah. I mean, Andrew, on a sort of practical level, you've got a requirement of any particular size that's focusing on Mayfair, St James. How tough is it to find a part?
Yeah, I mean, you might have 5 options and you might be one of 8 people chasing them. Yeah. So, you know, you've got to move. I mean, the one thing we say to our clients is, look, so you like the space, and we try not to sound like, you know, estate agents, but you better move because we better get on with it. So there is, you know, for the right space, it is tough, and there's competition out there, which of course is driving rents. And you saw our figure up there of below £200 a foot, but there's an increasing number of deals for the best of the best. Yeah. You know, 215, 220, 245. You know, we are fast heading up the curve. And questions, I'm not expecting you to answer, but are we going to hit 300 quid a foot in the next 18 months?
Do you want me to make a wild prediction? Which I won't be dragged into. Thank you very much. What I would say about the sort of trophy markets, if you like, of Mayfair and St James, I mean, you only need to look at the large deals of last year. 30 Duke Street, you know, pre-let. 1 Hanover Street now, 2 areas pre-let.
Pegasus, South Sackville Street.
Pegasus is beginning to go. These are all buildings you may or may not know. And the last one, the amazing Fenix redevelopment, fully pre-let. Like that is the three big buildings in the core coming through in the next 3 years, all gone. And that just shows you the level of demand that remains there.
Yeah.
I think the most interesting story, whether you're looking at the West End or the city, so from a central London point of view, is the development pipeline. The reasons for lack of development starts is obvious. Rents are doing fine, but yields are yet to sharpen. Finance costs are still high. Build costs are still high. So that's all fairly obvious why things haven't started. But look, here we are. This is West End. We've got a big delivery year this year. Various schemes that hang over from last year that will complete this year. I dare say that 26 line will probably come down as schemes that are due to complete this year go into 27. So it won't be quite as severe as it looks here. But there is no doubt about it. The West End will be kind of fine if you look at it from that point of view. From a delivery, there's enough coming through to kind of satisfy the demand that's there for the best. But when you start to look at 27, 28, the top shaded part of the column being schemes that have yet to start. So if it hasn't started now for a delivery in 27, that probably ain't happening. So you look at the 27 solid blue line, we start to get into a world where it's below the 10-year average completions, notwithstanding what we've said about people wanting quality of buildings. Most people still want a very high quality of buildings, so the demand will go to those buildings first. And you start to paint a picture that 27, 28, and deep breath 29 at the moment, it's fundamentally undersupplied for what the demand is looking for, which is a concern.
Yeah, I think if you look at this, just West End only, it gets even more shocking around 28, 29, 30 for the West End. It literally just drops to where that little blue line is for all those years, including what's under construction. So
it's another sleepless night for me. Thank you for being. That's great. I'll hand over to Andrew for the other side of the story.
Thanks, Andrew.
The real story.
Let me give you some sort of sound bites on things that we're doing here and seeing on the ground. So first of all, Savills did a workplace survey last year. We had 2,000 respondents, so a great result. And those were all ages. So we didn't just interview sort of CFOs and C-suite. It was from younger generation upwards. So right across a broad range of sectors, and we asked them 30 questions, and we're just going to touch on a few of them today, but if anyone's interested particularly in this, do get in contact. We've got a lot more behind this. So we asked people, what's the sort of the importance, of various factors in the workplace? And interestingly, quality of Wi-Fi technology. Understandably, everybody needs it. How frustrated are you when your phone doesn't work properly or your laptop crashes? Touch wood. And public transport, we touched on it earlier on. It is overriding. It is the big issue. How do I get to work? Which tube? What's my journey like? People have come back to the office, some of them reluctantly because they've had to, and they're really focused on what their commute is like. Cost. The cost of the commute is also very important. It costs a fortune, doesn't it, to live in London? But if you live outside London, then it costs you 6 to 7 grand a year to commute. So again, that's a big issue. And London, unsurprisingly, is often identified as having the most expensive transport network in the world, and it is painful. Access to toilets was an interesting one. Look at that. So again, I'm not surprised by that actually, because BCO spec, we all sort of designing these toilets at 1 per 10 on a 60-60 ratio. We often hear when we're on tours, is that it? Is that all the toilets we've got? And if you're going to max pack people into some space, there's often not enough loos. And developers don't like to put more loos in because it costs you net lettable. You don't get any rent on them, unlike other parts of the world where it's all included. So I think generally, I'm going to send this statement, I think London, we're pretty tight on the loos, actually.
It's one of those sort of strange emotional things, isn't it? Because your average, with great respect to the BCO, we're obviously talking to today, the average person doesn't go to the BCO recommendations, right? They just walk onto a floor and go, well, there's 5 cubicles, that's feel enough. It's also always struck me as slightly odd that we obviously build buildings generally with the same amount of loos in every floor, but that's not how someone occupies a building if they're over multiple floors. There's a floor that's very occupied, and there's a floor that's meeting rooms, and it's an unsolvable problem, but it's a problem for occupiers.
No, it's a big one. It's an interesting one. It's on there. It's fun. And what was interesting, look at the bottom. The two I want to pull up particularly: your bicycle storage and showers and changing rooms. We've all sat in meetings going, "Oh, end of trip. You've got to have loads and loads of showers, loads and loads of lockers and bicycle spaces. You go around those, and I reckon there's no more than about 20-25% of them ever being used in terms of cycle spaces and lockers. And people might have put stuff, and I'm a bit guilty of this. I might have put my trainers in a locker, and I probably haven't opened the locker for a month. So I'm taking up that locker space that probably someone else could make better use of. So, not everyone wants to cycle to work. We all thought, didn't we, post-COVID, that tube's dead, not going on the tube, I'll get COVID again. And sorry, I mean, there are some, people love cycling in London. It is increasingly a cycling city, but there's an awful lot of people who don't.
I think the surprising thing for us is we're expecting a lot more of the amenities to come at the top.
Yeah.
Like roof terraces, that came out. It's still important. It was about 62% rated it as important, but not as important as some of these other factors. Like the public transport ones were dominating the top 5. And I think that's quite interesting because we're seeing the divergence in what the decision makers are going for in terms of their real estate decisions and what the workforce.
Yeah.
Can we just jump out? There's one quite interesting stat on the last one. So this graph on the right, these 2 black lines on the right, this is quite interesting. So this is what sort of views on productivity. So if you ask of the individuals, people said they were, 35% of them said they were more productive in the office than working at home. But they also said that they thought their colleagues would be 50% more productive if they came into the office. So I think that was interesting. I don't want to come in the office every day, but you should.
Yeah, the mistrust on productivity.
There is a lot of that. There still is this mistrust about, are people shirking from home or are they working from home? So it's interesting. This is interesting. So we were sort of looking at, senior leaders versus sort of early career. What's sort of the most important building when they're looking at buildings? So external building design, important. I mean, if you're in something incredibly shiny and opulent, does it give the right image to your staff, to your shareholders? Are you charging too many fees if you're a professional services company? We're clearly not, because we're in a 12-year-old building, for no reason.
We're very different.
Access to showers, changing facilities, senior people are saying, yeah, super duper important, really must have that, but note my earlier point that don't over-specify them as a landlord these days. Environmental performance, yeah, it's important, but it's not, it's not leading here in terms of decision making. Facilities for pets in the office. Now, I've negotiated, I think, 5 dog clauses in the last 5 years. It's not a bigger thing as I think this looks out to,
I think this is idealistic.
It's a pain.
Yeah.
It's a pain bringing your dog to work. I've done trial days. We don't allow it at Savills, but I've done trial days where we've gone and worked in a flex office. And if I take my dog, isn't it lovely on the train? Everyone wants to talk to you and talk to your dog. But when you've got to go to a meeting, you're like, what am I going to do with the dog? So it's, I know other countries are really big on it, but it's an interesting one. And can you bring your cat to the office? Probably not.
In fact, first cat clause.
Internal design, yeah, clearly really important. I mean, we don't have, like parts of Europe, rules about depth to windows, but natural light, access to natural light, access to outside spaces, green, atriums. I mean, yeah, so there's probably not a huge amount of surprises in. Perception of transport. We touched earlier on this about, will people go to grade B space if they can't get grade A because it's in a great location? Well, no surprises there. Look, perception, again, this is our study, that Elizabeth line, got to be on the Elizabeth line. And the tenant rep team, we just get this, right, I want to be on the Elizabeth line, that's it. And then you say, well, okay, there's only 5 options, but I can show you another 15 if we, okay, we'll look further afield then. So it isn't the be all of everything. I mean, look, Victoria line's actually pretty good.
Yeah, I think there's this whole perception about new transport infrastructure. People want to be near things that are new and vibrant and shiny. Central line, not doing so well. But there's this whole perception piece around being in a location that's seen to have better connectivity and things like that. And that, I think that is impacting, even though there's no correlation in terms of any of the stats that we've looked at that shows there's a improvement in rents or anything. But there's this emotional piece around being near the Elizabeth line. A lot of people are talking about it. There's a big focus on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm surprised from my viewpoint that momentum continues. I can't quite remember how long it's been around for, a couple of years now, something like that, but it's still there, isn't it? That year on year, requirement to requirement. We saw more requirements last year, specifically stating the Elizabeth line as part of that requirement than we had in any other year. So it's a real thing, but perception only.
The one, I don't know, upset anyone saying this, but the one Crossrail station, Elizabeth line station, that hasn't really, I think, spiraled and spiked like Farringdon has, would be Paddington.
Okay.
Because, you think Paddington would have just boomed, Canary's feeling the upside, Farringdon seen massive rent increases, Liverpool Street, Moorgate, Bond Street naturally. But Paddington hasn't seen that. Right, must go to Paddington because it's on the Elizabeth line.
And it was a real beneficiary of this because the bulk of the rest of the stations are on the Central Line already, right? So that was Central Line, not very nice, but it got you there. Paddington, you had to go on the Bakerloo line from here. All the
rents are performing out there, and it's a good market, and there's a great stock coming through. But just as an observation.
So this is our active demand. So we're tracking all the occupiers who are active in the market or under offer. And we've seen a pickup in tech and media sector demand. A lot of AI related companies launching searches towards the end of last year. Do you have any?
Well, I mean, the Databricks search is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, they they're under offer at the network building. They started off as a kind of 40K requirement, and in the end have effectively taken 100,000 square foot building on the basis that we don't need it day one, but probably by day 2 or month 6 or whatever, we will fill that up for sure. And that's a real vote of confidence.
And we're tracking. We've got some great advert. We've got some great ties into the US, into the occupational markets, and also tracking funding and where demand's coming from. And it's really hard to spot these AI companies who come out of nowhere, and they might take a serviced office for 1,000 square feet, and next thing you know, they want 5,000 or 10,000, and that's where we're at the moment. So I'm quite excited by that. They're hard to spot. A lot of them are hiding out in serviced offices, and there's not that much transparency on who's in a serviced office. So I think watch this space, as London cements its space, its place, as I said earlier on, as sort of tech hub of Europe.
And they seem to be, specifically referencing AI, clustering around the King's Cross area. As you and I have talked about before, you then speak to your kind of AI clients and go, why is that? Is it because of Meta and Google? And they're like, well, a little bit of that, but actually it's sort of where everyone else who's in AI is going. So we'll just go there. So I guess well done, King's Cross and Euston and surrounds for becoming the AI, it is the knowledge quarter. It makes a lot of sense. They seem to be heading that way.
Yeah, and we're still seeing the bulk of demand in Central London being driven by the financial and insurance sector. There's been a lot of activity from the law firms in particular over the last few years, but we've kind of got to a point where we're only looking at activity for mid-sized firms at the moment. But I think the key takeaway from our active demand analysis is that, a lot of people talk about, we're seeing occupiers downsizing. Has there been an impact in the size of space that occupiers are taking? And the answer is no. In London, and I think this goes back to your point about the health of the London market and how it is a global leading city, we've seen more occupiers increasing their footprint, 52% than downsizing, 13%. And you've also got this ecosystem of occupiers who are moving from like Greater London, or they're new entrants to the London market, or moving out serviced office space. So, yeah.
No, definitely. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of my clients, new clients, they say to me, oh, well, of course, no one's taking more offices. Everyone must be taking a lot less offices than they had before. It must be tough for you as an agent. You're like, no, I'm sorry. Here's the stats. Only 13% are getting smaller. It really is. It's not what people expect to see. And I guess even when we were sort of aiming towards a 3-day week, which I think has gone, I think we're firmly into the 4-day week for most people, you still need the same amount of space. And if you want to encourage those people to come into the office and make the effort, then you're going to provide a bigger breakout area, more amenities, space, a nicer environment, perhaps a bigger desk area, different places and work setting opportunities. It leads to more space. So
I think people also forget that in the sort of 5-year hiatus since COVID, business has got kind of bigger in terms of the requirements of what you need within the business. I'm talking about things like compliance and governance. You sort of need more people to run that. If it's big business, run that business. The headcount's kind of gone up.
Do you want to say this one?
Yeah. So we looked at the average lead time from occupiers who are active in the market by the size of space that they required. And the kind of thing we're seeing is occupiers launching their searches earlier and earlier ahead of their lease expiry. Particularly the larger occupiers who are looking for 100K or more, where you've got real limited options. If you're looking for maybe prime grade A options in City West End right now, 100K plus, what do you reckon? Good options.
And count them on one hand, maybe 2 hands. just about if you're willing to be flexible on timing. I mean, it's purely a product of that availability, isn't it? You're a big occupier, 100K plus. Someone like Andrew comes along and goes, you got to get on with it because there are other people in different meeting rooms right now circling around the same space. You physically won't have any options, and that's why it so sharply falls away when you get down through the size ranks. But I'm also surprised at that, 10 to 15. I mean, we're just seeing, relatively kind of modest size occupiers coming out 2 years plus in advance of a lease expiring. I mean, it takes 6 months to fit that out, and they might come out and they might go quiet again once they realise actually there's plenty of options. We see that quite a lot, but they're certainly starting the search a lot earlier.
Yeah, I think one thing we haven't touched on is renewals, because I think that's really impacting our active demand stats.
Yeah.
You've got more occupiers doing stay versus go exercises than you had before, whereas typically they might have just stayed and renewed. You've got a lot more undertaking those exercises. Going back to the cost points you were making earlier.
Yeah, I mean, fit out costs we haven't touched on, but fit out costs have just spiraled. And we have, construction costs generally the highest construction costs in Europe. They're significantly higher than anywhere else. And when you're looking at fit out costs, we always used to say to your typical average occupier is going to spend 120, 150 quid a foot. That's probably now 250 a foot. And if you are a financial services, high-end corporate, wow, you're nudging 300 and up to 500. And I've got some of our clients at the moment who are spending over £500 a foot. I mean, you're fast approaching build costs here of space from scratch, not land value, but build costs. So that is also holding people back, I think. So as a result of certainly a lot of the work we did last year, about 60% of our occupiers who could have, stay or go, they stayed. And it might have been for sort of 3 to 5 years. It wasn't just for a year or 18 months, because if you're going to stay, you've seen the supply pipeline, you might as well commit for 5 to 10 years and work with the landlord to invest in the building, give you some rent free, because you're not going to find something in 2 years' time.
So yeah, that's pretty much wrap up everything that we've been talking about. London is leading.
Good luck, Sid.
Good luck. London is leading, and we're expecting the occupational market to continue to remain robust. But those decisions are going to become harder for occupiers in terms of the increased costs that they're looking at. So they're doing a lot more stay versus go exercises. There's a lot more, no negotiation being done around the leases at this moment in time. But the office is still here. Hasn't died, still doing really well. We're still in robust demand. And location is the key driver for the occupational market at the moment. Occupiers are very focused on location, even micro location to some extent. And yes, there's still viability challenges in the market, but we think that continued cost on that side of things and the limited supply we're seeing come through is going to continue to see a strong rental growth we've been seeing. The last couple of years we've seen 6%, 7% rental growth, prime rental growth across the market, and that's something we're expecting to see grow. But do we reach a point where tenants ask the question, is this too much to pay?
I thought, once we started nudging 200, this is going to slow down. But, in the core, it's not. People are saying, well, okay, if that's the cost. And London is, London's West End is the most expensive city in the world, location in the world. A big part of that is business rates. We haven't really touched on that, touch on that a little bit more if you like. But I think you've got to be in London. It's where the talent pool is. It's such an international city. I think with all of the events going on in various parts of the world right now, London is increasingly attractive as a place to put your business. We saw, first of all, when we saw the whole sort of Israeli crisis sort of kick off, we saw quite a lot, and we had some good clients ourselves who suddenly said, I better come to, I'm going to get bigger in London. And I think we'll see more of it. And I think, unless something horrible happens, let's hope it doesn't. But I think London and the UK is just going to benefit from a solid place to be, despite, and I'm not being political, but despite the government's best attempts to convince people otherwise.
What a way to finish. We'll hand back to Poppy if there's any questions.
Great. No, thanks, guys. That was brilliant. That was really insightful. Appreciate that. I think we have a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll just kick off with the Q&A. So I guess first question from me, actually, we're seeing Barnsley, you've just mentioned it, but the business rates re-evaluation coming in April. How do you see that impacting occupiers' decisions? And is it a conversation that's already being had with occupiers?
So I think, and I'll be careful what I say here, but I think the industry over-egged it. You know, I'm guilty myself of telling people in Mayfair, oh, you know, your business rates might go to 95 to £100 a foot from 50, 55 quid. You know, having that very few cases, but there's quite a lot of places where business rates, if you take, say, Hanover Square, 18 Hanover Square, one of the best buildings, probably top 10 buildings in the West End, business rates have gone up to 65, you know, they haven't gone to 100. Now, it is a lot of money. And my earlier point about London being, you know, the West End being the most expensive is because of those business rates. Because the rents are, you know, as high as they say they are in prime New York, you know, our rents are the same, but they don't have business rates. So it has been a bit of a shock. But what it is benefiting places further east. You know, Canary Wharf is seeing a real resurgence this year in activity. It's really doing well. And there's business rates are less than £20 a foot down there. Which is interesting. So it hasn't, you know, I thought it would hit us a lot harder than it has. It's one of those things, again, it's a bit like the rent. You just got to say it's the price of being in London. So sadly, you know, it hasn't had quite the effect, Poppy, that I thought it could have done.
Fine. So the way that you see it is that potentially what it could do is just push people into neighbouring submarkets that haven't been impacted so much by the business rates revaluation, and they'll just look at potentially as an overall cost, they'll move slightly further into Soho, and then
I think that's right, Poppy. Yeah, there's still some good areas where you can get a discount. You know, you don't have to go that far. Perhaps it'll you know really sort of bolster that demand in Paddington, because you know Paddington hasn't had a spike. I mean, Hammersmith and that West London market looks incredibly good value. They didn't get hit by much of business rates, and their rents are attractive. So I think you're right, Poppy. As supply tightens, you'll see people actually say, "Hold on a minute, I want to be well located, but business rates aren't that bad over there." It's really that Mayfair St James's market, but those are the people that can afford it.
Yeah, and then I guess for you, Hunter, do you see it impacting how landlords are kind of taking? Do they see it? Is it going to impact them in terms of their rental values? Do you think that that's a concern for them, or do you think that that's just they're kind of taking it in their stride?
I think they take the view that the market will decide what the market value is, right? That's not my sort of cop-out answer to your question, but you can only control the controllables, right? And rates are a tax. And as Andrew says, I think most of them, without any sense of arrogance, hopefully they're of the view, if you're centrally located, that at the moment is the number one decision-making criteria. So if I'm sitting on a building in a really great location, I'll back that to win out. But I do think it is an interesting debate to say, as much as I talked about the homogenization of rents across those kind of key central London, that's rents as opposed to the all-in occupational costs, and the differentiator, because they're based off historic levels, when you lump in rates, service charges, whatever it is, then actually that map that we talked about right at the start, you do start to see this bigger disparities. And so I wonder, as a question to all of us, I guess, is do we start to see in 2026 into 27, as Andrew talked about there, occupiers really beginning to at least ask the question, do we really have to be in this super expensive location, or can we start to ease the brakes off a little bit and just expand our geography? We see tenants starting their searches with a huge range of geographies now. Maybe that's not entirely because of rates. It's probably very, very minor part of that, but it's all part of the same conversation.
Okay, great. Just a couple of questions in the chat box then, in the Q&A box, sorry. So the first question is, do you think that the UK leasing system is set up to support those fast-growing companies? And do you have any thoughts on how it could be improved?
Sort of have a first go at that, if you like. I think the way the market has adapted, particularly in the smaller end of the market with flex, and how flex has grown from 10 years ago, probably 4% of stock to we're at 13% of office stock probably is now flex in certain areas. So that's how I think how it's adjusted. So people want more flexibility. It comes back also to this point of wanting fitted space. So you can go short term if you don't have to spend £200 a foot on fit out, because you can't write it off over 3 to 5 years. You need to write it off over 10. So I think we're adapting. We're still a bit cumbersome. And I still think our lease documents, certainly not short form leases, but the standard lease documents take too long to negotiate. And that's one of the most frustrating things for occupiers and agents. It's only the lawyers that are really enjoying it. Is that why does it take 3 to 4 months to get a lease signed?
Yeah, I think the physical space that we've all adapted to providing, as far as I can see it, answers the demands of what we need. everything from the hot desk through to conventional space and everything in between. But I think you're right that the barriers to the speed, the way legals have gone of doing a relatively simple deal, the length of time that is taking before you get to the fit out, and that's taking longer and it's more expensive. That's got to ease up somehow. And maybe the answer is short form leases, easy in, easy out. The average lease term has definitely come down. That's in a response to fast growth companies saying we cannot commit to more than 2 or 3 years. So that's fine. Landlords have kind of stomached that, if you like. And I think valuation has probably changed an element to kind of reflect that and not hit it so hard purely on kind of lease term. But there's a long way to go with those barriers to entry of, I just want to rent some office space. Why does it take me about 9 months to get in?
Yeah. I think London offers that broad range of different mixes and locations. There's still like really cheap locations. And you've got managed, fitted, flex, service. We've got so many different modules of working. I think it actually is quite good for new companies coming into the market because there's a broad range on offer and broad range of markets as well.
Right. Okay, we've got another question. So you spoke to 5 workplace factors that senior employees value more than junior colleagues. So, for example, the external aesthetic of the building, pet clauses, etc. Do you have data on the opposite? What do junior employees value more than senior employees?
Yes. Location, possible commute, location, toilets, access to toilets, and Wi-Fi. Those are the more important factors that more senior leaders didn't really value as much as younger people. They were very focused on the length of commute, the cost. So a bigger focus on location, also parcel delivery as well. That was more important to more younger workers, which is quite interesting. And we have some really interesting results if anyone's interested in hearing more on survey on coffees, like by age group, who's spending more. Young people,
vending is important.
Yeah, vending was more important to them. They spent more on coffees on average. So we've got loads and loads of results about younger workforce, so we can split that data.
I think one thing that's really pertinent is, provision of food. A lot of occupiers are now rolling out, lunches and breakfasts, not to every member of staff, but they're putting on sort of buffet and spreads to try and, again, track people back to the office and make it worth the commute again. Because it's so expensive, isn't it? I mean, I walk out the front door here, there will be a queue of people queuing up to spend £15 on a salad. And most of those people are probably sub 30, earning the least amount of money. And
after going to Boots, Barnsley.
You and I go to the Boots meal deal.
Change
from a £5. But, there's people queuing to spend 15 quid on a salad. If you can provide that.
Send me those occupiers doing free food.
Yeah, free food. People love it. I know it's a tech industry thing, but I think more people are doing it. So I think that's an increasingly important thing, catering.
Absolutely. Okay. And how much truth do you think there is in the recent media reports of London having the perception of being a dangerous city to overseas investors / occupiers?
It's such an that's a really good question. It's a really good question because I feel like I've talked about everything surrounding the theme of safety, whether that's employee safety, specifically around women as well. It comes up in, 5 years ago, I didn't talk about it, right? It wasn't a factor. And in the last 12 months, I've talked about it more than the previous 10 years combined. What does that tell us? I don't have a definitive answer because we can do it by statistics, right? And we can probably prove that London somehow has got more dangerous or it hasn't. But none of that really matters. It's a conversation that is happening more and more. And I can say from our viewpoint, like it now gets factored into decisions for the capital markets team. Those investors are factoring that in as a decision whether they want to buy in London because of it. It'd be interesting in other people's views of. I think it's difficult without being sort of controversial. I don't know about the big data on is London statistically more dangerous or not. I think there is a perception around we all know someone or probably had a phone nicked from generally outside your office as soon as you've left. Like that is quite a big contributing factor of people kind of going everything's more dangerous. But just my
perception is more important than stats. As long as people perceive it to be, that has a bigger impact.
I think people are really social media as well. I think there's a real focus, isn't there, on drive London down, look at the crime. I think, again, I'm not being political, but I think, the mayor will probably, justify on his re-election that actually crime has probably come down. But the perception is, if you get your phone stolen, yeah, London's a terrible, terrible place to be. And the police are cracking down on that. I mean, we're on Regent Street, and I don't see anything like as many of those people in black balaclavas on e-bikes, riding up the pavements so much anymore.
Okay, I think we've probably got time for maybe one or two more questions. In terms of sustainability, do you think material reuse will be on the up, and are occupiers driving this, or do you think it's more asset owners / the developers?
Start if you like.
Yeah.
I touched on it earlier on. I think the industry was led by asset managers, investment managers, purchasers of real estate, because they said, this is going to be the most important thing. We've got to do it. We've got to do it. And also their investors themselves were telling them that we can only invest money if it's going into green things. So we went on this sort of arms race. So it's here, it's done, but I don't think, we need to go massively further than we have as an industry. Do I think material reuse is important? Yes, I really do. I mean, generally speaking, everybody from the individual, I'm sure everybody at home is far more conscious of what they do with their own personal products, rather than just put it into landfill, especially as we live in such a small country, and where does it go? So reuse, yes, super important. And we're seeing developers, I mean, BL have been really good at it. When they take out marble from a 1980s, 1990s Broadgate office building, crunch it up, turn it into terrazzo flooring. I think we'll see more and more of that, and I think it's great, and I think everybody really gets behind it.
There's lots of, it depends what sort of materials you're talking about, right? I mean, wherever you are, it's retrofit first. So, you can no longer knock down a building and rebuild it. So that is a great example of, we will always now be, unless there's material reasons to knock it down and rebuild, be reusing existing buildings. What goes into those buildings, I'd say more often than not now, we're reusing raised floors.
Yep.
Right? So totally acceptable, right?
Yep.
Brand new refurbs, it's now not a shiny floor. It's doesn't get effects marketing in any way. So, and that, don't underestimate how much carbon sits in the raised floor. About 40% of the Cat A works, isn't it? So it's in that. So that's a significant part. I think one debate that I think we've still got to tackle is this kind of, it's a horrible habit, isn't it? We Cat A floors, as in, I assume we all kind of know what we mean by Cat A, but it's a kind of finished, ready to occupy floor. An occupier comes in and rips out ceilings and starts getting that. That is horrible. And that's got to stop. And we're only doing that because someone like me kind of goes, well, I'd rather market a nice shiny floor than one that's sort of shell and core. We've never, more so in the city, kind of get it, because it's more off plan, but we're pretty bad at it still.
And some of my clients, particularly on the tech side, are really keen on buying secondhand furniture. We used to, again, you should say, right, load of furniture, it's 5 years old, don't want it, give it away. In fact, we'll have to pay to take it away. There's many more businesses now set up to reuse furniture, and people are very happy to buy secondhand furniture. So I think, we will see back much more of that reuse question that was raised.
Great. Okay. Well, I think that's probably everything then. We really appreciate your time today, guys, and thank you for the insights.